All right, well, good afternoon again, and thanks for joining us. I'm Layla Shahidel, Project Director of WaitTech's Finish First in C initiative. Finish First in C is a high impact, high volume, low resource, and low cost solution for student success and completion. And we're delighted today to bring you another partner support webinar. The purpose of the partner support webinars is to provide technical support and helpful information as you're in the process of implementing the Finish First in C tool and your processes associated with that. Now, in today's webinar, in the first part, we'll be highlighting another Finish First in C partner college, Stanley Community College, today to hear how they're using the Finish First in C program. And secondly, we'll host brief office hours to answer any questions that you might have regarding using the Finish First in C data tool. And we do want to encourage you to ask any questions that you might have without hesitation. It could be that someone else has the same question, and we want to make sure that you're able to get everything that you can out of using the Finish First in C tool. Now, the office hours segment is optional. So if you'd like to only remain for the first part, you're more than welcome to do that and then excuse yourself at the end of the first segment. We will have a space for questions at the end of the first segment, but if along the way you have any questions, do feel free to type them in the chat box and we'll get to them as soon as we're able to. And of course, if you have any general questions or concerns, you can always feel free to reach out to me by email. Before we get started, I do want to share a few announcements with everyone. There are currently 51 colleges in the community college system that we've shared Finish First in C with. We have some folks joining us from our most recent college today that's adopted Finish First, and that college is Vance Granville Community College. So thanks for joining us if you're from BGCC. Also want to remind everyone that if you've not yet run Finish First in C to capture your spring 2021 students who might have unclaimed completed credentials, you can run Finish First in C to capture these students. And also, once your summer 2021 grades are finalized, you can run Finish First to capture students who are active in the summer terms that might have unclaimed completed credentials. And you want to be sure to update your transcript and former reports when you pull when you run Finish First in C to capture those students who are active in either of those semesters that you evaluate. And for advising audits, it might be a little tricky right now since we're kind of in this in-between stage. The summer term has just ended or is ending for many colleges, especially if you're looking for students who are active in the summer term. So if you are still enrolling students for the fall and your summer grades are finalized, there might be an opportunity there to run Finish First in C on the summer 21 students. And of course, you can always run them for the spring 21 students to see which programs they can complete by the end of the incoming semester, by the end of the fall semester. And once again, you want to be sure to update your transcript files, and for either the advising or the completion audits, you want to be sure to update your graduation file that you pull from Informer to make sure that it's inclusive of all students who graduated up to this point. Now, we are at work updating all colleges to Finish First version 3.0. If you're wondering when you'll receive your update, in general, you can expect to receive your update of your program at or close to the date of your initial site visit or within a year of your most recent update. And since we have expanded to more than 50 colleges now, we want to make sure that all colleges have access to the Finish First in C program, especially if it's going to be expiring soon. So maintaining this schedule helps us make sure that everyone is able to access their tool at any given time. Now, version 3 integrates student contact information and produces an output summary of the credentials and students identified. And that output summary also facilitates the data collection. So if you have received the new version from us, but you've not yet met with us virtually for a test run, I want to, again, highly encourage you to go ahead and set up a time with us so we can make sure that you're taking full advantage of the enhancements of the new version. Thank you. Has submitted your semester data for students that were active in the spring 2021 semester. If you've not yet submitted your data, there is still time. We would still greatly appreciate receiving that from you. Our data analyst, Jennifer Nicholson, emailed those forms to all points of contact on June 17th. So you can go to that email for the forms and send them back to her whenever you complete that data. In our last webinar, we reviewed the requested information that we want in the forms that you'll use in order to send that information to us. And the data will help us in a couple of ways. It'll help us improve the Finish First and See tool and the recommendations that we share with users. It will also help us understand the impact that you're seeing at your colleges, as well as it'll help us support reporting requirements for the grant that lets us continue sharing the tool with all colleges at no cost. And there might also be other reporting requirements that you have at your college that the data can help with. And if that's the case, we encourage you to use the data form and the reporting for your own requirements as well. And if you have any questions about the data form or any of the semester data, definitely let us know. I'd like to remind everyone that we have engaged the Belk Center at North Carolina State University to conduct an independent study of the impact of and the best implementation practices for Finish First and See. They may be reaching out to some of you very soon to hear from you about how you've been using Finish First and See. And today you'll have the opportunity to hear how stakeholders at Stanley are using Finish First. And if you and your colleagues are interested in sharing with others around the state how you're using Finish First at your school, I encourage you to contact me to let me know so that we can make sure that others are getting the benefit of things that you've learned and processes that you've put in place while implementing Finish First. And also, if you have any suggestions about topics that you'd like to see for a future webinar, we're very open to your suggestions, so do share that feedback with us as well. Okay, so after this webinar is over, I'll share a brief survey to gather your feedback on the webinar, so please do complete that when you receive it. We are recording the first part of the webinar, so as long as we have no technical difficulties, I'll share the link of that recording as well. We won't share the office hours segment just to make sure that people feel comfortable asking questions without having to worry about being recorded, but we will share the first segment. And lastly, I'd like to ask if you are not speaking to please make sure that you mute your microphones just to make sure there's no unnecessary noise or any distractions. And with that, those are all of the announcements that I have. So we can transition to our topic. All right, so today, again, we're delighted to present another spotlight where we're highlighting Stanley Community College, that is in Albemarle, North Carolina, and they adopted Finish First at the end of 2019. We're joined today by Patrick Holyfield, who is the Dean of Enrollment Management at Stanley Community College. And again, there will be a space at the end for questions, but if you have any along the way, be sure to put that in the chat box and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Once Patrick is finished, I'll come back on to transition us into the office hour segment. So with that, Patrick, I hand it over to you. And it looks like you're muted, Patrick.
You know what? I was muted. And the end. Thanks, guys, for staying tuned, and we will talk to you later. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Holyfield. I'm the Dean of Enrollment Management at Stanley Community College. I've been here almost 7 years, which is hard to believe, but you know, going strong. So for our enrollment management area here at Stanley Community College, we're a little different than some colleges in that we do share that one college philosophy. So under our area is our admissions office, and then our records and registration office for both the curriculum and continuing education course offerings. And so we, as you can imagine, we put on many hats throughout the day, and Finish First is one of those hats that we wear, and we get to share that with everyone else across the college. So as you see on the first slide there, you see my email. If you have any questions, you'll also see it again at the very end. If you have any questions to follow up later that you just couldn't think of, you can shoot me an email or shoot Layla an email, and she'll be able to get in touch with you. So without further ado, I hope everyone enjoys our topic today of how we use Finish First at Stanley Community College. And so the first thing that I want to cover with you today is just a little bit of history of Stanley Community College, where we were, what the things that we had noticed, and how we wanted to move forward with our actual graduation completion rates and what kind of tools we were looking for. Then from there, I'm going to share our data. So you guys know the information that you get to see or send once you complete the information, you get to send that information up to Layla through the spreadsheet. So what I did is I condensed some of that for us, put it in some handy dandy charts, make it easier to view, and hopefully explain the bigger picture of Finish First at Stanley Community College. And then I'll go through a little bit of our graduation and outreach, and then just like Layla said, at the very end we'll have some time for questions. So just a little bit of the history of where we were and moving forward into where we're at today. So whenever I came on board in about 2014, I was tasked with taking a look at our current processes and was given a degree audit process that was created, designed, but not implemented, and said to put this in place. And so when we were doing that, we were trying to figure out, what were the reasons why at the time we were seeing lower graduation rates. We were trying to figure out, why aren't credentials being awarded? What are the things that's standing in the way of students applying for graduation? At that time, we were relying on the student to come forward. So we were running a report. As many colleges do, we would run a report that identified those students that were within 90% or 70 to 90% of their courses, shoot them an email and let them know, hey, guess what? You're nearing completion. So if you want, reach out to us, let us know that you're almost done, and we'll get you squared away for graduation. And so we would send that out, once a semester to let students know that, hey, you're close to graduation. Work with your advisor to learn about graduation and how to attend and what you need to do. And it just wasn't getting the results that we were wanting. So in order to make that change at the college, our completion rates and our graduation rates, we had to take a look at the whole picture. What are the things that are contributing to our graduation rate? And then how do we move the needle on that? How do we make it increase? How do we increase our number of graduates and increase the students who are coming forward to graduate? So the first thing that we did was we initiated our degree audit process, which was a SAS report that was developed very similar to Finish First. So of course, you guys have been running Finish First, so imagine that, only instead of Excel, it's a SAS report, and it did the same thing. So hit the button, and out came a report that then let us know who was close to a credential and who had received a credential, regardless of what active program they were in. We wanted to make sure that we were capturing those graduates, cleaning up our data, so to speak, so that moving forward, we could put something in place that would remain on top of our graduation process, so that we wouldn't have to worry about missing those credentials, those active credentials for students. So we put this process in place, ran it for a couple years, bringing up our older catalogs up to current, and graduated students out, gave those students those credentials that they needed or earned, gave them the credentials that they earned, let them know if they want a diploma, a wall hanger, then we get that to them. There were tons and tons. We have a pretty big EDU program here at Stanley, and that was where we saw the biggest jump of credentials that we were awarding from that process, through that degree audit process, was straight through our EDU program, because over the years, those programs change with the requirements and what's needed. So once we finished that process up, so we ran that for a couple of years, and finally we got to a point where we felt that the data was pretty clean, that we had captured as many graduates as we could that were missed. Then we wanted to move forward. Now, SAS reporting, if there's anyone on here that's worked with SAS reporting to update the background of it, the programming, the coding that goes into the background, we didn't have an expert on campus, so we would always have to farm that piece out. And so we would have to work with colleagues in order to update our own data in order to run that process. So instead of continuing that process on, we felt that if we had a strong enough graduation process in place, then we'll be good to go for credentials. So we, at that point, then we initiated a new administrative graduation process. And this was maybe around 2016, 17, that we put this in place. And basically it relied on the use of running Bevel and then piggybacking that with a series of informer reports, be able to identify those potential graduates and the ones that are well pending, and then your completers. And so when you look at eval, then you've got those two flags that are on there. If you create a report that will then identify those students, you now know exactly who's eligible to graduate and who's going to graduate at the end of the term. So we took that information and basically ran with it. So we no longer had to rely on the student to come forward and say, hey, I'm graduating this semester. We knew who were the potential graduates and then who were the ones that were completers. And so then we had to figure out, so one of the pieces why students weren't coming forward for graduation was that we had a graduation fee in place. So the student would go their entire time at Stanley. At the very end, we would have like a $30 fee that they would have to pay in order to apply for graduation. So think of it more of like a registration at the end. So students didn't want to pay that money, and so they just didn't apply for graduation. So we had to figure out a solution for that. And so we looked through the code and found a way in which to put in place a student fee that's charged to them each registration period that will then cover graduation. And whenever I discussed it with folks, then it was a very easy sell, because we are a college of about 2,500 students. And so if you think about how that would actually play out money-wise, what the intake of those fees would be, you'd be looking at, so every year we would have, let's say, I'm going to use my handy dandy cell phone here, and I'll do the math for you right fast. If you had $30 times, let's say, 250 graduates who attended graduation, you'd have $7,500. So that was each year we would wind up with $7,500 in order to pay for graduation. So now let's say if we had added in a student fee, what we call our student success fee, at the time was $5, but we've moved that up to $6. But so $5 times 2,500 students, you got $12,500 just for the fall. So now imagine every term the students are paying that fee. And so we had, more than enough to be able to pay for graduation. We made sure that within the code we used a budget line item that would allow us to then any excess fees in the account, we'd be able to use towards anything else towards student success. So we also have a mobile app that we use, and we have our student IDs are also covered by this student success fee. And so it allows us enough flexibility to, if we have something that we want to put in place for student success, we have the funding to help get that generated and get that started. So we put that in place, so we covered the fee. So now the students no longer had to pay for graduation, so to speak. We put in place an administrative process to identify those graduates. And then we put together a communication process that then said, hey, we send them a letter or an email that lets them know, hey, you've completed all the courses for your credential, and we're going to graduate you in the system. If you'd like to attend graduation, here's your application for graduation. Let us know if you'd like to attend. And then B, the students who were pending, we would actually send them another correspondence that would then say similar, hey, guess what? You know what? If you finish up strong this semester, you're going to have that credential. So we're going to graduate you out of the system, and we're going to give you the information if you'd like to attend graduation. So here's our application for graduation. Fill that out, turn it in, let us know if you're coming. And we wish you much success in your last semester. So we put each of these pieces in place to hopefully start driving that graduation rate up. We wanted to be able to see, is this the piece that could potentially move the needle on that? Now, one of the things to keep in mind, it's not always just this process that contributes to that. Everything has bits and pieces that come from different areas of the college that then bolsters a graduation rate or a completion rate or a success rate at an institution. But this is one of those cogs that's in there that's helped drive that process forward. It's one of the pieces that then contributes to the overall success of our students. So when we put that in place, we started seeing the numbers start rising. And so just to give you an idea of that, here's our iPads report for our graduation rates. And so whenever I came in, it was around 2014, 2015, At that time, we saw a graduation rate of the lowest rate was at 18%. And you think, wow, only 18% of the students who are starting at Stanley Community College, first time in college, starting at Stanley, are going to graduate within that 1.5 time frame, the 1.5 time frame of start, from start to finish. And so, how do you sell that to students whenever they come? But luckily, that's one of those things where if you looked at other colleges' graduation rates, we weren't that far off. We were very similar to other folks in the system who had that similar graduation rate. And so we put this process in place. We changed some of our student support services. We changed some of the models that we use at the college. And we started seeing those things start rising up. And so, Patrick? Yes.
We have a question on the floor.
Sure.
Does Stanley have an early college program in place, CCP, CTP, etc.?
Yes, we do. We do have a early college on campus.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And so, so from that point, we started seeing that graduation rate go up all the way up to 48% in 2019. I mean, we're talking from 18% to 48% for our graduation rate. So now you could actually look across the campus, and every other person is going to graduate on time or graduate within that 1.5 time frame. So we were pretty impressed with that whenever we started looking at our numbers and start trying to figure out what do we do to keep moving the needle on success? How do we keep moving those pieces forward? But then once we had all of our credential data up to date, we started noticing that, it's good to capture all of those active credentials. And we currently use our graduation application for those stackable credentials. So let's say the student's in accounting and they want to go ahead and receive like a certificate in accounting also at the same time they're receiving their associate, then they would put the certificate on their graduation application instead of having multiple programs that are active and open. And so we needed a way to identify those because that's what our degree audit process was doing. And then, as you can see, along came Finish First. And so we as soon as we saw that come about, I started talking with a couple colleagues at another institution who were in the first round of Finish First processes, and they gave me the contact information. And ever since then, I've been a thorn in Layla's side for trying to figure out how to get it running, how to make it work, how to get everything, how to continue on this process of finding credentials for students. And so from that point forward, we've kind of changed how we look at it. We still use our administrative graduation process, but now we also have another tool in place to help us out with our graduation, our credentials, and also our outreach for the college. And so now just to kind of move into some of our numbers that we have associated with Finish First and that reporting piece that we send in there, which, by the way, if you've not done your summer report, be sure to get that done and turned in. So here you can see that we have our fall CU enrollment and our FTE. Like I said, we're around 2,500 or so. 2020 fall, we had an enrollment of around 2,700. 2019 fall, 2,770. So it just depends on where we're at and where we're looking when it comes to it. And then we have our you have things like COVID that then steps in the way and tries to smash our dreams and hopes and everything. But we were that's kind of where we're at with our enrollment. So then we wanted to start looking at our data from Finish First. And here you can see both our near completers and our new completers are relatively the same when it comes to our gender, our male to female ratio. And so it's kind of one of those things where you look at, is it, it's representative of our institution when we're looking at the numbers that we're seeing across the board. And for our race and ethnicity, this is kind of our makeup of the college. We're in I guess a rural county, and we have a nice city town of Albemarle, very similar. Now, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it's very similar to, I like to think of it as Mayberry. Now, I actually live in a town that's like Mayberry, so I could say that with pride, but it's a very nice, family-oriented town. And then we have, your farms and everything else in the background. So this is kind of our demographics group. There's some things that you can pick out of there. It's very representative of our county. Here's our age group when we're looking at our new completers versus near completers. I wonder if, and maybe this is something someone could say at the very end, if this is looking similar to your data that you're seeing whenever you're running through the information at your institution. This is one of my favorite things to show and let people know. Now we have a pretty big offering of online programs where I would consider us a majority online institution where the majority of our students take classes online versus coming to campus. And so it's not shocking to see that a little under 40% of our residents are from within the county, and over 60% of our residents are outside of Stanley County. And it's the same whether they were new completers or the folks that were close to completion. Sorry if you're one of the surrounding counties and your students are attending Stanley. Not sorry. So one of the other pieces here, you can see our Pell eligibility versus the Pell recipients. So this is one of those kind of weird numbers where I always have to give this straight over to our financial aid folks and let them sift through the student IDs and then let me know who is eligible and then who was actual completers. It's almost like a one-to-one. So we only have a handful of students, and you'll see the data here in a second. We only have a handful of students who are, well, you see it here, a handful of students that don't actually receive Pell, but were eligible for their credentials and stuff. So during the time that they were here, our Pell students were actually receiving, and then the same thing for our near completers. Almost all students were that were eligible received Pell. And just to look at our credential data when we're looking at those the charts on those tables. Here you can see that the numbers are relatively similar from year to year. Once we had that process in place, and I will tell you, I was speaking with a colleague yesterday that one of the things that's really helped us out with Finish First and running this process is that we cleaned up that credential data from the past, so that moving forward, we have relatively recent students that we can reach out to and say, hey, we have this credential to award you, or hey, you're one semester within graduating. And so it made it a lot easier for that process, and the numbers were smaller once we've kind of tightened up our process. So it's a little more manageable. One of the things that's neat is that our associate applied science numbers are relatively low when you're looking at it, which just means that we're on top of making sure that our students in those programs are taking the courses that they need to graduate, and making sure that they're staying on top of the courses that they need. So these numbers, as you can see, are a little bit lower. Diploma, always you're going to start seeing that increase. And then our certificates. Now, certificates are one of those areas where typically, like I said, again, our EDU program is really heavy. So we see a lot of our credentials coming from EDU, from Human Services. We have a lot of offerings for certificates in those two areas. So, and many of them are semester to 2 semester programs. So you'll wind up seeing how those students can really, if they're moving towards a credential, but then especially EDU, let's say you took your EDU 119 and a couple other courses, and now you've got the classes you need for that certification and you left. What you didn't realize is that, hey, guess what? You can actually use the classes that you took and create a certificate out of it. And now you have a credential to go along with those EDU credentials. And so the final piece that I want to share with you guys, again, was talking about our graduation and outreach. So what we do with the reports whenever we finish up is I actually take those reports and send them over to our graduation person, who then takes a look at that and processes those students for graduation. And so they throw them in the mix with all of our other identified graduates, our completers from our administrative process, adds them into that loop, and then starts getting them, communicating with those students to let them know, hey, you've earned this credential, here's the graduation application, let us know if you're coming. And then we send our folks who are near completion, we send that information over to our success coaches. And this gives them an outreach opportunity to where they can call those folks, call those students, and let them know, hey, you're only within a semester to finish up. We've got these classes that are coming up. They actually match the courses that you need. So what can we do, like car salesman, what can we do to get you in this college? So they actually, we use different times to try to offset our enrollment. So if we start seeing our enrollment slip a little bit, we'll use it before our 12-week courses to try to boost those up. We've actually used some of it this previous year to try to look at, if there's courses that we need to offer, what do we need to do? What are the classes that we're seeing that a lot of students are missing on that potential, or the near completers? What are the courses that they're missing? And how can we see about offering that course, and then contacting those students and say, hey, the course that you're missing is actually being offered right now. So if you want to get started back at the college, we can get everything squared away for you and get you closer to that credential. So we're looking at it in ways in which we could start kind to try to figure out, is our enrollment, because of the offering that we have, is it matching what they're needing, or is it, how can we be more flexible in what we're offering to hopefully meet that need for the students? And so we also share this information with our instructional side. They get to look at the completion reports and who's been graduated out, what are the numbers looking like for them, and stuff like that. So it's been a really good process for us, and it's really been able to identify those potential credentials, especially when they're not active in the programs, because we like to really keep our students down to one active program at a time, so it keeps everything clean. But this gives us an opportunity to be able to identify those stackable credentials for our students. And with that, I can go ahead and open it back up for any other questions. Let you guys talk about it. If you have anything you wanted to share with regards to your numbers, are your numbers looking like this that you're giving to Layla? Are they looking different? Are they looking wackadoodle? And then also, here's my contact information. And if you have any follow-up questions, or you just didn't want to say it in front of folks, that you can reach out to me that way. So other than that, let's open it up for questions. You guys can fire away.
We do have a question on the floor, and we can shoot this to you, Patrick, but I think we might be able to share some things as well. And Kai, I'm not sure if you want to share anything with this. The question is, how do you keep your CCP graduates in AAAS from showing in your traditional students for near completers, and also for high school certificates? So I have heard from, I don't remember what the college was, but someone mentioned to me that they run the CCP students, they run transcripts for those students, and then they run transcripts for the traditional students. So they run finish first in 2 different batches. So that's one way to guarantee, by starting with your transcript file. And then as far as the high school certificates, I know we were talking about this via email, Kelly, but one potential solution might be, once you have your graduates file, is to go in and do a search and replace in Excel. And if you're, I know we were in particular talking about the suffix on the end with the EC suffix after the regular degree requirement. So you can substitute that, replace that in Excel in the graduation file. That is an input. So then with your output, that takes out, that tricks finish first, so to speak, into thinking that the student has already gotten the regular degree that has the same requirement, so that they won't show up in your output file. Is that answering your question, Kelly? And Patrick, I'm not sure if you want to share anything that you've seen regarding that also.
I believe one of the one of the pieces that I noticed in the most recent version of Finish First that we have now, and Kai might correct me and say that's incorrect, Patrick, but I think we actually have our programs of study separated for our CCP, early college, and our curriculum. And so if our transcripts for our students from that population fall into that, it identifies them for curriculum credentials. And so looking back at code, especially for high school students, we can graduate them out of either of those prior to their high school completion now. And so there's not that much of a trip up when you're looking. I know before we really had to worry about high school completion and then an associate degree, whereas now they've kind of made it a little easier, especially with high school graduations occurring in June, for those students to be able to go ahead and award that credential instead of waiting until the end of summer and then moving forward. So for us, I don't think I've really seen an issue with that. At least I haven't heard anything. Let me put it that way. I haven't heard anyone complaining about it. I keep getting these high school students in my list. So I think for the most part, I think we're not really having that issue. But again, I think it's because Kai had separated out those early college credentials, those CCP credentials, from our curriculum listing.
That is, Patrick, you're right. We're trying to separate the credentials between the regular curriculum credentials from the CCP credentials. But when you get to the associate degrees for those early colleges, and at WECTech, we have EC at the end of those code. So what I do at WECTech is I actually, after I run the Finish First NC, I would take all the early college students out of both completion and new completion report, near completion and new completion report, so that they are not going to be sort of, we're not going to bother them. So right. That's the strategy at WECTech. The tricky part for the software to tell is that there is no information with those input files that identify the students are CCP students. So it can't tell whether it's a CCP student. It should be excluded. So we have to do something extra after we finish the running processing the data. So that's the strategy that I took. And there's some built-in functions within Excel. Well, with the assumption you have to pool your CCP population, because if you don't have the information who is CCP students, the software won't be able to tell you that, because it doesn't have anything to rely on, and it cannot generate something from nothing. So that's the bottom line. So we have to do some extra work in addition after you're running the Finish First NC. So that will be the strategy. But we have, for the version 3.0, we have the student contact information. Now, if somehow we can manage to have the CCP students, then we can add that into the software to remove it automatically, those CCP students. But then some of the colleges might not be happy. We do want the CCP students to be evaluated. So I'm in a no-win situation. You know what I mean?
I wonder if you can on that report. So you have your transcript file that's pulling from your student academic file. I wonder if you can actually pull in pathways. So if you have your pathway codes, a column for pathway codes. If it's blank, you're not worrying about it. If it's if it has that CTP, CTE pathway codes in there, then before running Finish First, filter it based on that, remove those students out, and then delete that column. And then now it goes straight into Finish First the way that it would have before. But you're just adding an additional column on that Informer report to say, show me your pathway. Or you could do, if you're running it for current, since it's current transcripts, you could look at their student type. So as long as you're running it during the time frame that you've got your current student type updated, then you can actually pinpoint those CCPP students. Same thing, filter those students, delete those rows, and then delete the column so it imports correctly into Finish First.
That is one way to go, but we all know the CCPP status changes at certain deadlines. So if you don't capture those information in real time, and after the end date passed, then you can't tell.
Right, right. So it'll have an impact on your spring students for sure, spring and summer students for sure.
Right, right. And we have a question from David Roberts. Do you disaggregate graduates and near completers by former CPCC? I'd assume you said CCPP, who transitioned to traditional status. I've noticed that the group has a much higher completion rate versus true first-time cohort at our institution.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. No, we haven't separated those students out to track to see those ones that are coming back for that final semester or whatever to finish up after high school completion. That would be interesting to see that, but that's good to hear, good data to hear that those are significantly higher rate than those that aren't. I guess it's good to know that they've got those classes already under their belt and they're wanting to get that credential.
Patrick, do you think you could speak a little bit to kind of your process in getting started using Finish First? It sounds like in Stanley's case, you probably had some coordination even before getting Finish First and Shower working on these sorts of things. But I know folks really love to hear, different approaches in terms of how to get off the ground with Finish First. I'm curious if you can kind of speak to that a little bit, what that process looked like for y'all from the beginning.
Sure. I think one of the, and you're right, one of the things that really helped us out a lot with this process is that we had that original degree audit process in place. That degree audit process actually caused us to look back at our policies, look back at our language that's on our website, and then look at how we communicate with our students. And so those were the three things that, anyone can clean up data, but then you're looking at that's all in the background. But then when you look at what are the things that the students actually see or experience, those are the things that you want to really pay attention to. And so we had to make sure that we didn't have any other information on the website when we switched over to that administrative graduation process, which then goes hand in hand with Finish First, because then we no longer have to, it's not a warning, hey, you're going to graduate. It's not a warning to the student that you're going to graduate. It's informing them, letting them know, it's a time for us to celebrate with you that, hey, congratulations, you've done a great job. You've earned this credential. You might not have known it. So we're going to go ahead and award it to you. And, it's really changing your language from where you were before to where you are now. And really, I think one of the things that you really have to take a look at and pay attention close to is your policies. If you have any policies in place or anything, any language that's on your website that students could be reading and seeing. And I always tell people, look at our website. Our website's not perfect. So if you see something that's wrong, let me know and we can get it fixed. But we try to make sure that the information's on there as accurate as possible so that when the student comes back to it, they see that, oh, wait, you know what? They did say that they were going to graduate me, and here's where it was in the handbook. And so just making sure that all your language is the same was something that really came hand in hand when we moved from that degree audit process into Finish First. We knew that essentially we had all the pieces in place when it comes to how to do it. We had our success coaches before that. Prior to that was our academic advisors. They were the original people that would reach out to the students to let them know that, hey, you're within a semester of graduation. What can we do to get you in? And then when we moved into Finish First, the folks that replaced our advisors, our success coaches, it's the exact same thing they would have done from that degree audit process. So really it mirrored the exact same thing we were doing. We just had an easier process. So thank you, Kai and team. We now have an easier process that's easier to maintain moving forward to keep those stackable credentials in place to make it to where it makes it easier for us to do it. Now, the one thing that we did notice that I would say it's almost a fault of a colleague or self-service. So we use self-service pretty heavily, is the graduation application there. So we just turned on our graduation application before this previous year's graduation. And so trying to, it doesn't pick up stackable credentials or anything that's eligible for the student. It only picks up what the student's active in or currently active in. And so they wouldn't be able to use the graduation application within self-service to identify, hey, I'm in accounting, but I also want this accounting certificate. So they wouldn't be able to communicate that with you without you actually having a process like Finish First in place to identify those students ahead of time. And so it's a good way for us to be able to do that. We're actually thinking of moving forward. One of the things we might try to do is how do we correct that? How do we make it to where we have more of a notification process of, hey, we see that you're in this associate degree, but you also have these stackable credentials you can get. So if we gave it to them ahead of time to say, let's make these programs active on your account, and then you click off on the applications within the system. And so you might be asking yourself, Patrick, why would you do that? So the reason why we would do that is because it makes it easier on us. It builds that record, that graduate record in the system for us, so that it's already there. So we don't have to go in and each one by one go through and do it. But I think the things you really want to take a look at, especially that's helped us out with Finish First, was your communication with your students, what you're sending your students, your website, make sure that your information is correct on the website, and then the policies that you have governing around credential earning and your course substitution and everything like that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there other questions for Patrick? Or any other final thoughts or lessons learned that you think might be important to share, Patrick?
Really think that, and these guys are great. I would say if you ever have any questions with how it works, I think once a term I send Layla, what's my password? I've gotten to where I finally saved that. So, no worries there. But early on, that was the one thing, if I could say for the new folks, early on, the one thing that you want to remember is your password. Because guess what? Then they send that report to you, the report file to you to fill out, and guess what? That's a different password. So you just want to make sure that you can remember your passwords that you need for Finish First.
And if you don't, let us know.
But they're always very receptive and answer relatively quickly for how we try to get the information to them faster. I tell you that it's one of those things where you really have to swallow your pride and just be like, you know what, I seem to have forgotten my password.
And we don't judge. We don't judge.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Patrick. If there are other questions for Patrick, we're going to stick around until the end of the hour for the question and answer segment, and Patrick will too. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.